All right, this is lecture 3.4. The focus is on just some key terms around ethnicity, and then looking at terms around ethnic conflict in preparation for some of our exploration of specific ethnic conflicts. So first, some definition. So you'll probably have heard of ethnicity, race, and nationality, and maybe you've even wondered what the difference is between each of these, and it can be difficult sometimes to differentiate. You can see here from the U.S. Census form, so every 10 years, the federal government has to take a census where they count the people that are living here, and among the things they ask are race and ethnicity. And you can see here where it gets a little murky and how you even report some of these things. So ethnicity is any kind of group that has a shared cultural ancestry and identity. Okay, race is a group that it's a social construct, but it is a group that shares physical characteristics. And so like the obvious ones would be white or black or American Indian. And for the federal government, various different groups, for example, of Asian groups are counted as race. Ethnographers don't necessarily count them, though, as races. They would consider them ethnicity. So the federal government counts Chinese, for example, as a race in census forms, but an ethnographer would say that that is an ethnicity and a nationality. Nationality just indicates citizenship. So you could live in China, your nationality be Chinese, but you might not be ethnically Chinese if you have some other shared cultural ancestry with some other group of people. So you can see that it can get pretty murky, again, some of these things just being human constructs that fall apart for many of the reasons. So a lot of the definitions are unclear. The human experience of hundreds of thousands of years of migration, very diverse, and so it just gets really hard to categorize people. But an ethnographer these would be the definitions they would give. So ethnicity, again, shared cultural ancestry. A race as a group with shared physical characteristics and not necessarily a cultural ancestry or a shared country. Nationality would be citizenship without perhaps any ethnic or racial connection to that country. Okay. So next are words around ethnic conflict, and so there's kind of mild ethnic conflict into very severe ethnic conflict. So first here, just showing you, to set up for some of these next terms, is showing you a taco that has crickets in it. This is from Mexico. Think about your reaction to that particular food. So key terms: cultural relativism would be the belief that there is no right way to do something, like no right way to do tacos or whatever. So there's no right way to do something, that norms are just based in culture. So the right way to do something, again, is defined by where you kind of spent the majority of your time maybe growing up, or where you spend the majority of your time living, the kind of culture that you identify with. But that's not necessarily the only way or the right way. If you had a negative reaction to the cricket taco, that would be like shades of ethnocentrism. So this is where you judge other cultures based on your own culture, and it's usually negatively. So you put your culture at the center, that's ethnocentric, believing that your culture is kind of the right way, your right definition of what a taco should be, or the right kinds of things to be eating. In this case, if you were like negatively judging the crickets, that would be like, oh, gross, that's not something that we should eat. Again, that's an ethnocentric opinion, where in other cultures, eating crickets or insects or other things are totally the norm. Okay? And then a more severe version of ethnocentrism is ethno-nationalism. So when ethnocentrism starts to impact politics and leads to a nationalism based on ethnicity. So the most extreme example of this would be like Nazi Germany. But your country can have much lighter shades of this and still be demonstrating ethno-nationalism. But it is, again, where thinking that your culture is doing it the quote-unquote right way or the best way starts to impact the politics and how it's treating different peoples and different countries. That's when you have stepped into ethno-nationalism. Okay. Next would be even more severe is ethnic violence, which is what we're going to be looking at examples in countries. And one kind of quick positive note in a world of lots of negative news. So when I was in high school, it seemed like there was genocide or ethnic cleansing happening on every continent. Those numbers are way down. There would be a blip here with Gaza being the most pressing example right now. But that would be, again, low compared to especially like the 70s and the 90s, where there was a lot going on. So good news is that these things, as we have globalized and we get technology in the world, industrializes, and the proliferation of things like phones, we are seeing, at least right now, a decline in ethnic violence. But there are two terms to understand about ethnic violence when it does happen. There is ethnic cleansing, which is the expulsion of or killing of an unwanted ethnic or religious group. The most recent example, besides what's happening in Gaza, would be Myanmar expelling Muslims a few years ago. Ethnic cleansing, so for those who are considering perhaps a career in international law, ethnic cleansing is an easier charge to bring against a country or military or people, because it doesn't mean that it was like deliberate, like a government policy, that maybe it happened as a side effect of whatever they're doing, but it wasn't full-on systemic genocide, which we'll get into the next term. So when you're doing the class activity where we're trying to figure out how to respond to a country, if the accusation is ethnic cleansing, is a severe accusation. It's a horrific thing, but from an international law perspective, it can be easier to bring charges of and deal with ethnic cleansing. Genocide is the deliberate or systemic destruction of a racial, ethnic, or religious group. So examples of that would be like the Holocaust or Rwanda, where it is a documented, again, deliberate political, governmental policy to fully destroy, remove from the face of the planet some kind of racial, ethnic, or religious group. Ethnic cleansing would be more like policies, and maybe people are dying, but it's trying to make them move out of the country, move out of the region, whereas genocide the goal is to actually eliminate that group of people from the earth. So it's a much more severe charge. When brought against leaders and governments, it can be very hard to prove, and it's, again, a much more severe charge coming from the international community. And governments can react negatively to both charges when the international community tries to intervene, but especially when genocide is the charge. Okay? And that will play into the Model UN type activity that we're going to be doing. Okay? Again, the trend in both is that they have been declining, especially over the last 10, 15 years. So there is some good news in the news there. And that is it for this lecture.